Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, the best thing about the future is that it hasn't happened yet. And the best thing about the past is you can go back to a time before you saw Madam Web. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies, in quotes, like Madam Web, which we'll be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Just a small update this week. Last week, I mentioned that I am going off candy for a while. And this week, just like our beloved Willem Dafoe and Martin Scorsese, I had to resist the last temptation of Reese's. I ordered my healthy weekly grocery delivery, and they offered me 90% off.
Jeez.
The last remaining tranche of Christmas tree-shaped Reese's. We're talking the big bag here, well over a pound of deliciousness for $1.09.
Jeez. How many trees is in a pound?
I don't know, but it's a lot because they're the mini trees. They're not the full size. They're like the snack size ones.
That could be like 30 trees.
It's a large amount. It's a hefty bag. It was quite a temptation for $1, but I said no because I'm on a righteous path. And for the time being, I shall not be turned aside.
That's right. Ian's given up candy, but he hasn't given up nose candy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
High five, Ian.
Hi-yo. Yikes.
No, I'm kidding. Ian would never.
I've never tried that. I don't think I would like it as much as Reese's.
Neither have I. I think I had chances when I was younger, but I didn't partake. And now I'm like, I'm too old to try cocaine for the first time. I got kids and stuff.
I grew up in that just say no era where it was like, they kept trying to tell kids that like one sniff of cocaine, man, your heart might just explode. And I'm like, okay, I can't take that kind of risk.
They didn't know how true that was because fentanyl wasn't invented yet. But now that's like actually the case, unfortunately.
A high risk environment.
I'll be honest. I was so focused on preparing this episode, thinking about what I was going to bring for show and tell. I don't have a life update for the listeners because I don't know. Stuff's just going okay. Nothing too crazy.
I hope it's a no news is good news kind of situation.
I would say so. I went and played some pinball last night. That was a lot of fun.
That's fun.
I dominated on the Venom machine like I always do. Shout out to Tim, a constant listener who has been my Sherpa into the world of pinball, but he gets his shit stomped in every time we play on Venom.
Yikes. I'm sure you didn't want to hear that on the podcast.
I don't give a fuck, son. I'm all revved up and ready to go. We're talking about Madam Web, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. What did you watch this week that you wanted to share with the listeners?
I watched a brand new streaming miniseries called American Primeval. It's on Netflix, just came out January of 2025. It's written by Mark L. Smith. You might not know the name, but he wrote The Revenant, and he also recently wrote Twisters. It's directed by Peter Berg, one of our BZ buddies, who we covered in our Battleship episode, The Rundown. And it stars two of our mainest men, Shea Wiggum and Blast Zone patron St. Taylor Kitsch. It's even got Betty Gilpin, who we had on in The Hunt, and that's not even the end of the list of cool actors that are in it.
The cast looks great. Love to see our boy Taylor flourishing.
He's in his prime, man. He started young, so he's not even that old, but he's playing a little bit older roles now. The show starts out, it's basically like Oregon Trail, the limited series. Okay. It's sort of historically based, but they juiced it up. Lots of grit, lots of violence for the streaming audience's enjoyment, and lots of fun twists to the plot. The one thing that stands out about this, we know from movies and shows that everyone in the Old West was dirty. They were all just covered with dirt, but everyone in the show is caked with grime on levels that no one's ever seen. The filth budget for this production must have been astronomical. I finished all 6 episodes, which is, I guess it's a testament to the quality since I'm known to have all.
Yeah, you're not a show finisher.
I'm not a finisher.
You don't have that compulsive need that everyone has, like to finish a show.
I'm not a closer. They pulled me out in the 5th inning after 75 pitches.
That's why you haven't had any coffee today.
Coffee's for closers. We know that. It's not an amazing show. I didn't finish it because it was like the best show ever. It kind of bogs down and maybe gets a little predictable towards the end, but it hooked me in enough that I got committed that I was like, I got to see how it plays out for these characters. And overall, if you like some gritty and extremely grimy Old West historical action, it's worth watching.
I got a couple questions for you about the show before I decide if I want to invest the 6 hours or so.
That's fair.
1, would you rank it higher or lower than Godless, that last Netflix Western miniseries?
It's not as good as Godless.
Okay. 2, does Shea Wiggum have a mustache?
Shea Wiggum has a beard and mustache.
All right.
He runs a fort in the wilderness. He's very good in this. I mean,
he's very good in everything.
He is, but this is a fun character. It's a historical character that you can look up afterwards. I think the character's name is Jim Bridger. I think he might even appear in the actual Oregon Trail computer games.
Really? I didn't know they did that.
I don't know. At least least in the remake. I played this remake that they put out recently, and it had maybe more details, but I learned a little bit of Old West history, and some of that was triggered when I watched the show.
All right. Because, Godless, do you remember who was in that?
That was some of our main men. I forgot the cast of Godless.
It was Scoot.
Scoot, of course.
We were scooting, and then they were like, you thought you had it good with Jeff Daniels and Scoot. We're going to throw Shea Wiggum and Taylor Kitsch at you. It's like, all right, guys, let's take it easy. I only have so many hours in the day.
And then a little Betty Gilpin for a good measure. She's really one of the stars. Her and Taylor are sort of the duo.
Yeah, my cousin was actually recommending Mrs. Jones to me, which is her Peacock show.
Oh, is that weird one?
She's a nun.
Is that maybe called Mrs. Davis?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
He kept calling it Mrs. Jones, and he couldn't remember the real name. And then he texted me when he got home. It was like, it was actually Mrs. Davis. I made the same mistake.
Sure.
Yeah, so Betty's having a moment on TV. And of course, Glow, which is great if you guys haven't seen Glow.
We like Betty Gilpin.
So I watched something, from what I understand, of American Primeval. Is pretty violent.
Sure.
Pretty upsetting at times, but I got you beat, man.
Uh-oh.
Can't let Ian watch something more upsetting than me. I had to bring the heat. Longtime listeners of the show will know I have a bit of a preoccupation with cartel violence and things of that nature.
That's true.
I found a Spanish language miniseries from Netflix from 2021 called Somos. And I remember seeing the trailer for it maybe like when it was coming out. And I was like, oh, I got to watch that. And then as things do, it slips through the cracks and you forget about it for a little while. But for whatever reason, maybe it's because we were talking about Amelia Perez. And I was like, there was a show based in Mexico about cartel violence that I really wanted to watch. So I reverse engineered it and figured out that it was called Somos.
Okay.
And it's about a real thing that took place in 2011 in Allende, Mexico, which is a border town only about 25 miles from the U.S. border, where Los Zetas, probably the most infamous and violent cartel we've seen out of Mexico, basically set up shop in this small town to avoid government interference because there was a place no one would really look for them, and gradually just took over the town, corrupted the services there, took over businesses. And then when the DEA got involved and tipped their hand a little, they murdered about 300 people in the town and
Holy shit.
just left the area. The extent of it wasn't even known until years later because they took great lengths to dispose of the bodies in ways where like an exact count would be difficult.
My God.
But this is a show that really takes its time ratcheting up the tension and the violence. It's not a violent show really up until the very end, but it does such a good job of developing the sense of impending doom. And when we're dealing with American-made shows about cartel violence, they could be a little gung-ho about the U.S. And like this really condemns the U.S. for the role it played and how it abandoned these people across the border after it made a mess, which is, I don't want to say refreshing, but it was good to get that perspective. It's just a devastating show, very upsetting, but very well made, well acted. A lot of familiar faces if you watch any good amount of Spanish-speaking TV, particularly drama, which I do. So it comes with a very heavy-hearted recommendation, as in it's really good, but it's also going to ruin your day and possibly your week.
Yeah, it sounds like a burden to bear. I'm not sure I'm up for that. I definitely have to be feeling a little bit of strength of spirit to invest myself in that kind of thing.
At least there's nothing going on in the real world now that would make you feel weary of spirit and hopeless for the future.
No.
And it's only going to get better because we're talking about Madam Web.
Here we go.
Here we go. The last of our 2024 retrospective. Madam Web is a movie that I watched almost immediately after it came to streaming, but with the caveat that there were many beers, perhaps some herbal supplements. I watched it with my wife, Jamie, and some friends, and therefore we weren't really paying attention. We were more just making fun of it.
I can picture that.
And it 100% works on that level. And God help me, give me this movie over Megalopolis and or Argyle any day of the week because it is just a beautiful disaster. It's almost impossible to judge this movie on its merits, and we'll get into the reasons why. But what was your relationship with this movie before we started talking about it for the show?
Obviously, this movie had a reputation that preceded it. I was curious to see if it lived up to the ridicule that it was getting, and yet I didn't bring that much enthusiasm. I didn't arrange any kind of watch party, and so when I took the opportunity to check it out, I didn't get further than the ridiculous opening sequence. And then I'm like, holy shit, this movie is truly insane, but I don't feel like subjecting myself to the rest of it. So I waited until it was time that I needed to watch it for this episode to really see it. And I didn't know how strange it was in full. It's strange in a myriad of ways.
There's no other movie like it is the best way I can describe it. All the reasons why will become clear as we go through the episode, but my heart almost goes out to the cast and crew of this movie because it feels like the movie was stolen from them at some point.
There's a lot of feelings you get watching Dakota Johnson, Adam Scott, and they're all kind of mixed.
Yeah, but there's some names in this movie. It's not a bunch of nobodies.
Yeah.
Even if you maybe don't know everyone's name, you will recognize a lot of faces too. It's an interesting situation, but I feel like we kind of have to give a little backstory on the movie before we can talk about it in too much depth. So do you want me to get into the making of it?
Yeah, please. Let's hear how this thing happened.
All right. When Madam Web was announced in 2019 as the next installment in Sony's Spider-Man universe, the move felt like a gamble. The character, a clairvoyant with psychic abilities connected to the Spider-Man lore, wasn't exactly a household name. Yet Sony was banking on the project to inject fresh energy into its Spider-Man adjacent cinematic universe.
They were hoping to make it success adjacent.
With S.J. Clarkson, a veteran of acclaimed TV shows like Jessica Jones and Succession, making her feature debut as a director, the studio hoped for a grounded, gritty tone to differentiate Madam Web from other superhero fare. The screenplay, penned by the dubious duo of Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, who wrote such gems as Morbius and Gods of Egypt, underwent a long and fraught development process.
In other words, they morbed all over that script.
Early drafts envisioned a storyline featuring Ezekiel Sims attempting to prevent Peter Parker's birth, creating ties to the Spider-Man mythos. However, as production neared, Sony demanded significant rewrites, cutting 20 to 30 pages from the script, which resulted in what can charitably be described as a disjointed narrative. Casting began in 2021 with Dakota Johnson tapped as the titular Madam Web. Her casting, reportedly the result of Sony narrowing its shortlist of A-list actresses, raised eyebrows given her admission that she had never seen a Marvel film and couldn't name a single Spider-Man movie correctly.
Technically, she got one right when she said, "I'm not into the Spider-Verse."
Sydney Sweeney, hot off her breakout roles in Euphoria and The White Lotus, joined shortly after, alongside Emma Roberts, Adam Scott, and Isabela Merced. Filming began in 2021, with Clarkson reportedly granted creative freedom to realize her vision. However, the production faced upheaval when Sony opted for significant reshoots in early 2024. These were prompted by a decision to change the film setting from the 1990s to 2003 to align with the timeline of Tom Holland's Peter Parker rather than Andrew Garfield's. This shift resulted in a scramble to retrofit plot elements. Marketing for Madam Web leaned heavily into its thriller tone rather than its connections to Spider-Man, a decision that ultimately backfired. Early critical reviews were brutal, with the film scoring a dismal 11% on Rotten Tomatoes. Miss Marvel star Iman Vellani even gave the movie a half-star rating on Letterboxd, but she did add a heart to her review. Audiences' reactions weren't much kinder, with many citing the film's confusing plot, lack of stakes, and miscast leads as its major flaws.
That's nitpicking, isn't it?
Financially, Madam Web was a disaster. It grossed $100.5 million worldwide against a $100 million production budget and $80 million in marketing costs, resulting in estimated losses of $75 million. The film opened to $25.8 million over its 6-day debut, but saw a sharp 61% drop in its second weekend, finishing with just $43.8 million in North America. Analysts called it a box office bomb, further damaging the Spider-Man universe's already precarious reputation. In the aftermath, Dakota Johnson expressed little interest in returning to the superhero genre.
She was 50 Shades of done.
While Sydney Sweeney used the experience as a stepping stone to build relationships with Sony for future projects. For Clarkson, the film's failure cast uncertainty over her next steps in feature filmmaking, as she still does not have a future project lined up. Madam Web now exists as a cautionary tale for superhero cinema, a film burdened by indecision, overhauls, and lack of clear direction. What could have been a unique addition to the Spider-Man universe became a muddled misfire, leaving audiences and critics wondering if Sony should finally put the Spider-Man universe out of its misery. And they would when Kraven came out. They announced there's no more.
We'll have to pick that one up eventually.
Yeah, just not right now. We need a break. We need some good movies.
Based on what you said about S.J. Clarkson, I have more sympathy for her now. Clearly, this movie was wrenched in all different directions. The fact that she said they were aiming towards a grounded, gritty tone, maybe there's little hints that that was in there, but gritty is not the way this movie came out.
It is there if you squint, but it's certainly not on the surface anymore. I feel like the real story about this movie hasn't even really been told yet, and maybe it will one day.
Okay.
But it's a little too soon to really know. We might have to do a Madam Web redux in a couple of years if we get the full scoop of like, what was the plot of this movie really supposed to be? Because it's not what we got on screen.
Okay.
You know this. You've watched it. There's no way you would have to redo that much dialogue in post. Not re-record it, but just make up new lines for characters in post if you were like dealing with a story that actually made sense on the screen.
You would think, but I didn't do the hard work to figure out based on how much you can tell has been changed. Like, it never suggested that a scene went in opposite direction than I thought. For me, it felt like small tweaks and stylistic choices maybe were being made, or that they just didn't like the script that they had. But I don't like, for instance, have an alternate view of the plot line based on, well, here a guy cuts off mid-sentence when it sounds like they're going to go this direction, they go this opposite direction kind of thing. It's more like, it's really mundane stuff that they seem to have replaced.
There's a couple things I could point to as my headcanon for what was changed.
Okay.
One of them is is the early scene with the girls in costume beating up Ezekiel Sims and killing him. I get the vibe that was filmed later.
Okay.
And I don't think she went to Peru until those early 2024 reshoots, because one of the young girls that she's adopted essentially says out loud, you have to go to Peru. But that's not what she says. That's not what her mouth says. So that just felt like they had to cover up whatever she actually said and make her say, like, it's okay to leave us for a week while you go to Peru to investigate this.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that, because I happen to think they did an interesting job bringing a character arc home in that sequence. So I'm like, if that wasn't in the movie, I don't know what was, to sort of bring the Madam Web character to fruition. But probably better if we go into details on that when we get to that part of the story.
Was there anything you wanted to talk about before we started into the specifics of the story?
Now let's start spinning the web.
All right.
Flashback to 1973, and an extremely pregnant woman named Constance is in the Amazon rainforest researching a rare spider, whose venom is believed to confer special healing powers. She finds the spider, but just then her evil colleague, Ezekiel Sims, played by Tahar Rahim, shoots her and runs off with the spider, just as Constance goes into labor. Constance is rescued by a mythical tribe of spider people called Las Arañas, who let another such healing spider bite her. Constance unfortunately dies in childbirth, but the healing venom saves her baby girl, who is then returned home to the U.S. to grow up in foster care. Now it's 2003, and that baby is a grown woman named Cassie, played by Dakota Johnson, who works with her friend Ben, played by Adam Scott, as New York City paramedics. One day on a call, Cassie plunges off a bridge, and Ben has to revive her from near death. After that, Cassie begins having premonitions, confusing little visions of things that are about to happen around her. Then when she has a vision of a crash that kills her co-worker O'Neill, played by Mike Epps, Cassie faces the fact that she can see the future, and maybe she can even change it. Elsewhere, the evil Ezekiel has gained wealth and power due to his spider-like powers, but he's plagued by visions of his own future in which 3 young ladies in spider hero costumes cause his death. And so he's determined to find out who they are and kill them first. So he steals some NSA surveillance software, and he hires a hacker to help find the girls.
That hacker is none other than Shoshana from Girls.
That's right. She knows how to find girls. She just calls them up and
Yeah.
says, hey, you want to meet at the coffee shop?
Where do we start? Keep in mind as we go through this that the first third of this movie, for me at least, is by far the strongest.
Yeah.
It's only downhill from here. The movie opens in the Amazon with my number one girl, Carrie Bechet, who deserves better. She's fine.
Small little role as Constance, the mom.
She's great in Halt and Catch Fire, if you haven't seen that. But she's convincing as a pregnant scientist, I guess. But the cracks show almost immediately.
Yeah.
When Ezekiel Sims from behind her, with his mouth clearly pasted shut, somehow says, I agreed to protect you because you said you were close to finding the spider.
That's a pretty good impression, I have to say. You could have done some of the ADR for this movie. It's funny that in a movie that is absolutely packed with dialogue recorded in post-production, they started off with one where they kind of like the magician shows you the wire, shows you the secret right up front where they've got the closed mouth on screen while he's talking.
Yep.
That's pretty insane. But that sets the tone for how insane the movie is.
There's more scenes like that than I cared to count. Like stuff I didn't even notice on the first watch. Anytime Ezekiel Sims was on screen, I was like, let me see what he's actually saying. Does it match? And I would say it's like 30% of the time he's saying the lines live as written, and 70% of the time is ADR.
He is the guy that most needs the ADR patrol called on him. Should we call him in?
We got to call him in. We're going to need them to set up a crime scene here.
All right. I'm pressing the emergency button on my life alert.
ADR Patrol.
Oh, you do have life alert. I was worried about you. I was hoping you would have that.
Yeah, it's weird. And so this movie's out on Netflix now, which is a boon for anybody listening to this episode in the month of January or February 2025. Who knows how long it'll be there. But something I notice is my bandwidth is not always perfect from Netflix. So sometimes I was getting the slightly chunky picture quality, and then you really can't tell. Like, I wasn't sure if I was overestimating how much ADR was being used because they put people in the background when they speak by default. They kind of like decided, well, because we have to do so much ADR, we're going to make this look like it's an editing choice. So every time someone talks, instead of cutting to them talking, we're going to cut to the back of their head, or we're going to cut to them standing in the background.
Or they're out of focus. Yeah.
They're in the background. They're out of focus. They've got reflections and blurs covering their lips. And so sometimes it's not even true. I think Netflix was kind of hamming it up for me by making my resolution a little bit blocky, and it made me even more suspicious that nobody was actually saying lines in person.
No, I watched it on my lightning fast internet connection, and it was just as bad. Maybe Sony was like, look, you can have Madam Web on Netflix, but you got to throttle the resolution so people can't actually see what's going on.
You got to junk it up for us to give us a break.
In addition to all the tricks that you said, there are also several occurrences where somebody just thinks things. They don't say anything out loud, but like there's a robust internal dialogue with a lot of these characters because, for example, Ezekiel Sims will say things like, my spider, they took my spider.
Right. And they kind of write it off to the fact that both the main character, Cassie, and her adversary, Ezekiel, have these spider powers that cause them to just have sort of unforced visions at any time of day or night. So like you can basically do any exposition you want to do in this movie at any time just by having visions and words pop into characters' heads.
Let's talk about Ezekiel Sims a little bit.
Yeah.
I love him. I think he's my favorite character in a movie ever because he never says anything specific. He just says things like, they won't destroy what I've built. But it's like, what have you built?
Right.
We don't even know what you do for a job.
Figure out what you do.
Like you have a fancy apartment with a nice terrarium for your pet spider. That's all we know about you. And you have a Corvette. If he's like mega rich, I feel like a Corvette is not like a really rich person's car. It's like a person who wants to seem rich. So that's like a weird choice for his car.
That's a good point.
But like, yeah, what does he do all day? What's his job? Did he use his spider powers to become an arms dealer or a drug dealer or some kind of financial trader? Or did he make all his money gambling because he could see the future maybe? I don't know. But I can't figure out what business he's in.
Those are all good ideas. And yeah, they put none of that in here. It makes me think of Argyle last week, where it's like the Division's job was not being caught. This is a bad guy whose whole job is just not being caught as a bad guy.
One day those girls will have powers.
Yeah, he's also vague on that.
It's almost like a childish way of speaking, because does he have any lines in this movie that are not about the spider or powers or him getting murdered? He's the thinnest character for a main bad guy I've ever seen in a movie. Like my original theory was that he was like a henchman in the original version of this movie. And then they were like, shit, he's got to be the bad guy. But I've come around that I don't think that's necessarily the case.
He has one character trait that humanizes him slightly, where he says things that are more than just like generic expositional phrases, because he's haunted by these visions. Every night he has a dream where 3 teenage girls blast the shit out of him and kill him. The lines they wrote for him to tell you about that are actually a little bit sympathetic. He's like,
their faces have haunted me for years.
He's like, you would do this too. Like, my life is shit, man. I have these horrible dreams every night. You would try to kill these girls if you were me. And it's actually a little bit humanizing. Maybe it's only because it's the only thing he says that sounds like a real person talking, but
he would have been fine if he didn't shoot Carrie Bechet in the Amazon. Yeah.
Right before she died.
Right. I was about to say he shot her in the Amazon right before she died. That's a line of dialogue that would fit in this movie.
It would fit right in. No one would question it.
Speaking of, let's get back to the Amazon. Yeah.
Speaking of the Amazon shooting, man, they shot that scene. I don't know. I'm taking back some of my early praise for Clarkson. The way that the Amazon scene is shot, when it comes to a head, Constance is celebrating. She's like, I got my spider. She's just standing there in the middle of her little base camp. And then there's this weird sounding gunshot. And then he's standing there and he's taking pot shots. He's killing everybody in the camp. And the camera is like swinging around and zooming in and out. It's kind of shot and edited like a comedy sketch. Like, I didn't get action thriller out of that scene. I got like MacGruber maybe, or maybe like some kind of TV sketch show. That scene just made me laugh. And I know it was not supposed to.
Yeah, I have no explanation for how that scene is shot. It's, again, once you see the cracks in this movie, like you look for it everywhere. And I don't want to be the guy who's just sitting there like, I don't think that's how it was shot. Right. When they're live on set, like something else is going on. But even the way he shoots them, it's almost like he's not moving the gun as if it's firing, you know? And like you never see him and somebody he shoots except for Carrie Bechet in the same shot.
Yeah.
Like it always is them. And then it cuts back to him and he shoots, and then it cuts back to them like falling down. So you see where I'm going with this.
It's weird. It feels like cheap television, which to me adds to my general impression, which is, despite Clarkson's original intent, this turned out like a children's movie. So it's like a children's TV show. It's like Land of the Lost version of a brutal shooting, if they did those kind of betrayals and shootings on children's television. Because it's like cheap. It's like, well, we don't have the effects to show a guy step up and shoot someone and do the blood and the stunt work. So we're just going to wiggle the camera around while you hear sounds of gunshots, and like that's going to convey it to you.
I didn't get kids movies or kids shows. I got like YA, like WB shit, maybe 12, 13, not like little kids.
So I think that's what I'm thinking.
There are some scenes where it's like pretty violent and dark, like the scene on the train or the scene in the diner. Like those scenes feature some pretty gnarly kills, and it's very much at odds with the tone that like they are established in these scenes.
Yeah, so maybe that's where the hint of that grounded grittiness stayed in the film.
And those scenes are some of the best in the movie.
Yeah, because they're a little bit exciting. Everything else is kind of, all the edges are sanded off. The Las Arañas, I'm sorry to say, kind of a funny idea. And then I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to look like when we see them? And they look real ridiculous on screen.
They do. But shout out to my boy, Jose Maria Jaspic, as the leader of Las Arañas. He was one of the main characters of Narcos Mexico. He played Amado Carrillo Fuentes, who was for a time the biggest drug trafficker in the world and died after going under for plastic surgery.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, but there's rumors he didn't die.
Oh.
See, it's crazy. But he's not great in this. He's a good actor.
He's not good. Yeah. He's ADR to death. He has the benefit of the camera being halfway in a pool of water while he's talking, so the water can cover his mouth and they can put any words they would like to put into his mouth.
Yeah, his whole thing about one day you will come back when you are ready and I will be here was like nobody said that shit on set.
He
like,
didn't say that.
He's just standing perfectly still and silent.
I feel like people aren't even going to believe us when we say like none of these lines were said by the actors, but it's obvious when you see it that it's not. It's like it's one of those human intuitions that you don't know you have, but it kind of just works.
I know I have it. I've been the ADR patrol for years now.
That's true.
So I know I'm overly sensitive to this. So imagine what this was like for me.
I know it's crazy because I know I'm not sensitive. You pick up on a lot that I miss, and I was just, it was so blindingly obvious in this. It's kind of insane.
It's so bizarre. I've never seen a movie made like this. This movie's worth watching just as like an experiment.
It's like they hit a tipping point. Every movie has to do some of that, or not every movie, but lots of movies have to do a little bit of reshoots, re-editing, changes in post. And, you know, for the most part, we tolerate it. This movie sort of started down that road. At least that's my feeling, is like they started down that road and they added more and more. And they were probably all looking at each other like, this is getting kind of crazy, right? And then they're like, no, another round of changes. And then it just became the movie. And they like hit a tipping point where it's like,
they were stuck.
It's no going back. That's the whole movie, you guys. We're just going to see what audiences think. And I do have to think that part of what audiences react to is that the movie feels strangely fake.
Yeah, even if they don't really know why, even if they're not tuned in or know what ADR is, I think it's like a sixth sense that you'll have that something's wrong here. But one of the characters who gets to say most of the lines that she says on set in the actual movie is Dakota Johnson as Cassie.
Yeah.
Cassandra Webb. They seem to have kept most of her lines. And particularly in these earlier scenes, I thought she was pretty good.
I have a weakness for Dakota Johnson. I think she's kind of weird, but I can't help liking her when I see her on screen. And I think she was good casting for this movie because she seems really good at playing an asshole. I don't know if that's how she's like in real life, but I feel like
she's definitely sarcastic in real life. If you've seen the interviews with her,
okay,
yeah, she takes the piss.
Yeah, so she's a funny character, and Dakota Johnson as a person, her personality really works for this character Cassie. She's maybe too good at it. They established that she's such a miscreant and a misanthrope and an asshole in the first scenes that when like 10 minutes in, they insert some scenes, almost a literal save the cat scene. She helps the stray cat to like soften her image so that you know that she's actually has a good heart. I didn't even register those scenes until the second watch. I'm like, oh yeah, they're trying to tell you that she's actually not not deep down bad.
No, I think most of the scenes in this movie that I like legitimately enjoyed were because of her. There's one scene where she starts to, I think it's in the second act, but she's like, how do you know if you can climb walls if you've never tried? And she just like jumps at the wall and falls down. And I was like, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, that was her being a little silly. It's cute.
But she's very good casting for Cassandra Webb. I think she's god awful casting for Madam Webb. Once she becomes the kind of character that would have been the driving force of this franchise if they were to go forward, there is no future here because she sucks as Madam Webb. She's terrible. It's so counter to like her on-screen personality to play that character that we see in the late third act.
It's a Hayden Christensen to Darth Vader kind of a flip that like you can't picture somebody that just can't be as cool. Like Madam Webb is supposed to be a cool, spooky, maybe older lady. I don't know in the comics.
She's like decrepit in the comics.
Okay. Like a spooky clairvoyant who's blind and wheelchair bound and hovers in shadowy places, lording it over things. And they try to make her that in the last 2 minutes of the movie. And it's pretty silly.
And also maybe she dated Spider-Man's uncle. There's definitely a hint of a past romance with the Adam Scott character, right? Because when he tells her that he met someone, it's not like two friends just chatting about it.
You're right.
In a lighthearted way. He's like concerned about hurting her with that information.
That's a good point. He conveys a lot. I mean, God bless Adam Scott for bringing a touch of human likability and warmth to this movie. My impression right away was Adam Scott is basically trying to hold on to a Macy's Day Parade balloon by himself in a windstorm as the movie blows away around him.
I hope he doesn't get sewed into the pants of the big Charlie Brown.
That'll wreck your life.
One thing I didn't appreciate about this movie is that they keep saying it takes place in Queens, even though that's clearly Boston. I'm not fucking new here, but
you're not. I am. I guess it didn't feel totally authentic, but I couldn't have pointed that out.
And the Mike Epps character, what's his name? O'Neill.
O'Neill.
Where he's like, hey, Cassie, next time you want to go swimming, just go to Astoria Park. It's Like, you guys are in Forest Hills. There's dozens, nay, hundreds of public pools between Forest Hills and Astoria. You fucker. Like, look at a map, but never mind. The Queen's Explainer has logged on.
Yeah. I would not have known that. Thank you for standing up for the network of public pools available in the borough of Queens.
I wouldn't swim in them, but they're there. Like, they exist.
Speaking of O'Neill, his death is a big part of how Cassie discovers her powers, right?
Yes.
In what I think is maybe like a too drawn out sequence. She has like 3 innocuous experiences of deja vu / seeing the future. Goes on for a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah, like at the baby shower, she has a few moments where she is experiencing deja vu, and she's like, we already had this discussion.
Yeah, but there was like one before that, and then there's the big one with the death, and then there's one after that where she makes another discovery that maybe she can change the future. It feels like a long stretch of this movie is just her being disoriented, and by the fact that the content of the scenes is the main character being put off and disoriented, it's off-putting for the viewer. I'm like, I'm tired of this. Like, we get it. She's getting these visions. Let's do something with it.
Yes, I have a note on that, I think, in the second act, because when they were on the train specifically, and like she keeps having these conversations with people, but then like she snaps out of it, but then she has that conversation with somebody again. But sometimes they're not always in the same order as the vision. Like, stuff happens a little out of order than it did in the visions. And I'm like, I'm so fucking confused. What has actually happened right now?
I think their goal was to make it so like it felt complex and nuanced and there was no single path through the future. But the fact that the scene to just establish that she gets on a train and she has repeat conversations with like 3 or 4 different people, it's like they're really like hammering this point home more than we needed to sit through.
Yeah, but the O'Neill death scene, kind of silly.
It was really silly. And I had forgotten. So on my second watch, I laughed out loud. I was like, I think because there's so much silly stuff in the movie, by the time I got to the end, and this is near the beginning, by the time I got to the end, I had forgotten. So much silly shit happens. And it's supposed to be really dramatic. This is like a really painful moment. This girl loses her friend and she was just learning her powers and tries to stop him, almost stops him, but can't, and he dies. It's just an example of all the smaller level choices in the movie that are frivolous and silly and undermine its reality. It starts out where this big team of firefighters and paramedics are responding to this fire in a fireworks warehouse, and there's people hurt everywhere. And the funniest thing to me, because they needed to have Cassie in the middle of this scene start to have visions and sort of be distracted, they put her alone. She's giving CPR to a man lying flat on the ground. She's doing it alone, by herself. She's got like the ventilator bag in one hand and she's doing chest compressions with the other hand. That's not a one-person job,
right,
if you have a lot of paramedics on the scene.
No, but the rest are all busy elsewhere.
They are busy. In the middle of this, while Cassie is just solo doing some light chest compressions on a dead man, 3 people, including Ben, swarm past her. It takes 3 guys to push a gurney, a rolling gurney, with a guy on it who they immediately tell you, this guy is fine. Yeah. This guy's got a broken leg and no other problems. He's stable. Now she corrects them because she has powers, but they thought he was fine, and yet they're taking 3 of them to push his cart past her while she's alone trying to resuscitate a dead man, and then they don't comment on it. They leave her. They walk away.
Ben says, good catch on the internal injuries.
Yeah, good catch. See you later. Good luck resuscitating the dead guy. And then her boss, Mike Epps O'Neill, from across the way goes, hey, Cassie, get the fuck over here. I need you to do this other thing. And he sees her with a dead man. So for the story purposes, she yells to somebody off screen, he's fine now. And the dead man, they show his face for a second. He sort of blinks awake and goes, oh, and smiles.
Even he was surprised that he's fine. Like,
he didn't know he was fine.
He's like, well, if she said it, it must be true. So I guess I'll wake up now.
I don't know that I can convey just how ridiculous I found that little sequence to be, but I was cracking up.
It's so true, but it's also a sequence that, like, if you're just casually watching this movie, you might not catch how much dumb shit is going on in that scene.
Yeah.
Because it all makes sense from a story point of view, but then you're like, the details don't make any sense. Nobody thought about this in any kind of like critical way.
The details are insane. Yeah. There's one other scene where the funny little scene details go off the rails, but that one was a lot of fun for me, unintentionally.
Speaking of details that go off the rails, I have a qualm.
Let's hear it.
John's got qualms. I fucking hate the little peekaboo shit that this movie does with the fact that Emma Roberts' character is pregnant with Spider-Man and Ben is Ben Parker, aka Uncle Ben. But nobody says last names, or like when Ben tells Cassie he's seeing somebody, she goes, what's this one's name? And he just doesn't answer her because like they were like, oh, we don't have the rights to Aunt May. So like we can't say the name May. Or like they're trying to guess the baby's name at a baby shower and everyone's, what about like Robert? Like,
Richard.
Yeah, Robert Parker, Spider-Man? Fuck you. Like we all know who that baby is. But like you guys didn't get your rights cleared up before you made this movie and now everyone has to play fucking mystery shit.
Yeah, did you notice she's about to say it? She goes, no, his name is, and right as she does that, a balloon pops and the time loop rewinds and takes Cassie back so she doesn't get to hear it.
Fuck you. Not you.
But I didn't catch all that. I think by the end of the first watch, I was like, Ben, Uncle Ben. You don't mean old Ben out in the dunes. I forgot my Star Wars quote, but no, it's not Obi-Wan. It's
Old Ben out in the dunes.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Hey, man, that was 1977.
You haven't seen it since 1977?
I probably saw it once or twice. But yeah, I only caught on to a little bit of it. And then you clued me in that like Spider-Man's whole family is in this movie. And I put the pieces together on second watch. And then it is funny how much they kind of keep that just under the rug from you.
So if this is the Tom Holland verse, if this is the origin of the Tom Holland Spider-Man, man, Ben really fucked up by getting shot by that mugger, because that means he had Marissa Tomei 20 years before we meet her. She's still a babe. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Apropos of nothing, but yeah. Don't get yourself shot, dummy.
Talk about humanizing the character of Ben. I feel for that guy.
If it was the Tobey Maguire Aunt May, different story.
Okay.
Sweet old lady, but very old. Was there anything else from this section we had to? Oh, yeah, don't press your burgers, guys. Don't do that on a grill where the fat just drips into the flames. As Cassie says, that's flavor, man. And she's right.
She's right. Cassie kind of won you over with her burger pressing commentary.
Yeah. Where does Mike Epps get the balls to start telling Cassie and like no one will give her a beer? I fell for her in that scene. She almost died. They make her drink Pepsi.
Listen, they were contractually obligated to hand her a bright blue Pepsi can, logo facing out.
What, do you think Pepsi paid some money for the product placement in this movie? I wouldn't have guessed.
It's funny that they paid to have a Pepsi can in that scene, and then they paid to have a old-timey Pepsi sign kill the villain at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, that's the Pepsi abandoned fireworks factory. That's a Queens landmark.
Of course.
Pepsi owns this old factory that they just filled with fireworks and left it. I think it's in Long Island City.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Is that how Michael Jackson got burned?
It was.
They shut that factory down after the Michael Jackson tragedy and said no more fireworks.
It happened to James Hetfield too from Metallica. He got it once.
Oh shit.
On stage. He got like an inferno of flame right in his face.
I mean, the fireworks in this movie are absolutely devastating. They destroy helicopters. They kill people left and right.
They're basically just missiles. Yeah, they're not like, they're colorful rockets. Like, well, I guess that is what fireworks are. Fuck.
Yeah.
Fuck that up. Colorful missiles. Missiles with flair.
The bomb's bursting in air.
Little pizzazz. All right, you want me to walk us through the middle section?
Please, let's hear what happens next.
Ezekiel Sims starts to locate the three teenage girls, and we learn that they are Julia, played by Sydney Sweeney, Anya, played by Isabela Merced, and Maddie, played by Celeste O'Connor. And all three coincidentally have just boarded the same train out of the city. Ezekiel tries to attack them there, but Cassie's visions have brought her there too, and she intervenes. While Ezekiel fights and kills the police with his spider powers, Cassie drags the girls out of the train platform, steals a taxi, and drives them all to safety in the woods just outside of the city. Cassie leaves the girls in a safe wooded spot while she goes home to research her mom's notes and learn about Ezekiel's powers. But the impatient teenagers get hungry and walk to a nearby diner, where Ezekiel's surveillance notices them, and he heads there to kill them. Cassie rushes back and uses her growing prescient powers to outmaneuver Ezekiel and foil his new attack on the girls. In this round of confrontation, Ezekiel and Cassie both learn more about each other's goals, powers, and origins. Cassie drops the girls with her friend Ben in Queens for safekeeping and jets off to Peru to dive deeper into her past. There she meets the leader of Las Arañas, who presided over her birth 30 years ago. The tribal chief takes her through a ritual where she makes peace with the memory of her mother and unlocks the full potential of her spider powers. Their powers.
She's got some powers.
One day they will have powers. What were the girls doing on the train to Poughkeepsie? We've established they all live in the city. There's no reason for them to be there, and they don't know each other.
No, I mean, that's supposed to be the mystery of the movie, is what is the mystical, universal sort of spider power that's pushing these people together, the three girls and Cassie.
It's the Peter Tingle.
Hi-yo. Yeah, I didn't even notice it. I mean, I knew they were doing something, but I didn't notice they methodically went through and pushed all three of the girls in front of Cassie in earlier inconsequential scenes, so that there was like this sign that the universe was pushing them together.
Oh, don't get me started on when she meets Maddie, who skates in front of an ambulance and then flips off the ambulance driver for not running over her. I was like, what is this character's motivation here? Why is she mad at the ambulance because it stopped short to not murder her?
Well, I think because she blooped the siren at her.
She skated in front of an ambulance.
I know. It's silly. And
it's not endearing me to that character to be like.
And Cassie calls her out. Cassie says, who flips off an ambulance?
Yeah.
But like Cassie's in full jerk mode at that point, so you don't feel that sympathetic towards her either.
True.
But yeah, why did these girls get on the train? Because they had a meeting with fate.
Like, I don't know if you know this about Poughkeepsie. It's not a place people just go for the afternoon for fun.
Okay, I didn't know that. I was wondering, what's in Poughkeepsie?
Nothing. I was born there.
Oh, really?
Vassar Brothers Hospital, baby.
How far out of town is that?
It's like 2 hours north of the city. It's not nearby.
Oh.
It's like north of Newburgh and Beacon, New York.
Okay, it's not helping me, but
There ain't shit there, man. It's like a real Rust Belt depressed city. So yeah, I know Cassie was going there because that's where the funeral for Mike Epps' character is.
right. No, they don't.
There's no explanation for what the girls are doing on that train, as far as I can recall.
Yeah, the girls do a lot of like over explaining of kind of who they are, but also it's all very thin. Like they have to teach you in the course of these scenes that each of them is a pseudo orphan. They're not entirely or genuinely orphan, but they're all detached from their parents and sort of on their own, each in their own unique way, which I guess is like set up for how that they can be taken under Cassie's wing and become superheroes and not have a lot of issues with their folks.
Yeah, this whole movie is just a 2-hour advertisement for CPS. None of these girls have a parental figure that gives a fuck.
No.
You get this sense that Anya's dad seems to be the only one who didn't actively want to avoid his child,
Right.
but he got deported. But then that begs the question of when she's just living with this strange lady at the end of the movie, what does her dad think about that? Is he like, are they in touch? Does he know she's okay? Or like,
It's very thin. When the girls appear, that's when, I say this about a lot of movies that I think are kind of dumb. Like it feels like a children's movie to me, and more accurately, like a tween thing. But it's especially once the girls appear in this movie, their interactions are not very sophisticated. They're just not written like real people in the real world. They're written like characters in Saved by the Bell. They kind of have like quippy jokes and singers, and they don't feel real at all.
I know she's probably not that much older than the other two girls, but like the fact that Sydney Sweeney's been an established adult actor for so long makes her stand out as like bad teenage cosplay.
I didn't think of that.
I'm like, that's a grown ass woman. She's like 28, which that's not that crazy to play a teenager. She still does it on Euphoria, but like a lot of the roles she's been taking in between Euphoria and this are definitely more like she's playing an adult human out in the world
Yeah.
with a job and responsibilities. And this feels like regressive almost in that sense.
I mean, yeah, they've dressed her down totally like schoolgirl style. She's the most innocent and naive of the three. So it's all weird. But maybe the fact that she is in her late 20s is why Cassie felt okay leaving her in the middle of the woods.
What a fucking move to just drop them in the Jersey woods and be like, I'll be back later. She gave them like half a bag of old jerky that she found in the cab. And then she drives this beaten up cab like all over town. It just gets more and more destroyed.
She's been crashing it around and stuff to try to escape things.
She's like Conor McGregor in the Roadhouse remake. She just doesn't brake. She just drives into shit.
Drive it like you stole it.
That's the saying. Yeah, you're right. But just hilarious that she just leaves these girls in the woods. And like the movie knows it's ridiculous because the girls call her out on it. Like, you can't just leave us in the woods. But she's like, I gotta go.
Right.
Like, I got stuff to do.
Yeah. This scene has my other absolute harebrained bonkers moment in terms of the small bits of action, which is the campfire. It feels like when Cassie pulls up that she should be pulling up into like a campsite,
Right.
a campground for car camping where you could like pull into a thing and there'd be a bench and a stone circle.
Like a state park or something. Yeah.
It's not that though. If you look, it's barely a clearing between trees. There's all kinds of dead brush, leaves, branches leaning sideways against trees. And yet at the beginning of the scene, there's a campfire. Julia's character is poking it with a stick and going, I always wanted to be a Girl Scout. And it's like, what are you doing? Why did you build a fire in the middle of the woods? And then
You don't know shit about tending a fire or keeping it from getting out of control.
exactly the way that she's just kind of dumbly poking at it with the stick, like Chaka from Land of the Lost, like she doesn't know what she's doing. How did she even get it lit? I have no clue.
As a dude who's tried to build fires and failed, not every time I try to build a fire, but I'm saying I'm batting like 500 where like I can build a fire if I have all my druthers.
Little practice.
She just fucking just finds some sticks and like where'd they even get the fire?
Maybe it was burning when they got there.
Did they like infiltrate like a homeless encampment and like just scare them all away?
Actually, that would be the best explanation. Because then, to make things more silly, I think whoever designed the scene regretted putting a campfire there because there's a long scene. There's a lot of dialogue between all these characters while they're standing in this slight clearing in the woods. And so you can kind of hear, if your volume's up, you can hear the fire crackling in the background for several minutes. But they shoot around it because they didn't want to have to pay to animate any more CGI fire on the ground. And obviously, there was no real fire when they were standing there for hours shooting this. So just like with the mouths that they don't want to move, the camera will pivot so that there's like a fallen tree blocking just the fire. Like you can see everyone else in the shot, but there's a tree covering just where the fire would be. And once you notice it, you feel like they're deliberately trying to hide it from you. And you only get like 2 more super slight glimpses of it until the girls decide to leave the woods and they walk away and they show that they left the fire burning. They didn't even think twice.
Yeah.
They didn't look back at it. They left a fire burning in the middle of the New Jersey woods.
Cassie should have gotten there and like, what the fuck? And like with a blanket, like trying to snuff it out.
She should have come back and seen the forest burn down and went, what the heck happened?
It's also funny that like she left them in the woods, quote unquote, but there's also a diner like right there. Like you could throw a rock at it.
Yeah.
So did they really need the fire? Like were they scared they weren't going to be able to find their way back to civilization? Like they all have cell phone service.
Yeah. Although actually only one of them had a cell phone and she threw it out the window.
But then how do they know there's a diner?
They passed it. I think that's what they say.
Oh,
like,
okay.
did you see that diner we passed half a mile up the road? Yeah, it's just, there's some incongruities there. But yeah, having seen the diner, these crazy teenage girls can't stay focused and they couldn't resist going to get a bite and more.
Look, you ever been to a New Jersey diner? I mean, they got those disco fries. They're delicious.
I could go for some of that.
I could go for some disco fries right now. But then the diner scene is also weird and frustrating because the girls act like complete dumbasses.
Yeah.
I totally get going there for some food and maybe getting some food, bringing it back to your little encampment, eating it in the woods would have probably been the smart way. But no, they go away, order food. Sure, you were abandoned in the woods. You're hungry. I get that. But then like within minutes, they're dancing on tables.
Dancing on tables.
Where are your self-preservation skills? Like you also just saw 8 cops get murdered a couple hours ago. And like there's just no trauma evident on any of these people.
Yeah. And I could almost see a plausible way. You know, it starts with the Sydney Sweeney character is looking over her shoulder and she sees there's a cute bunch of boys from the high school basketball team sitting at a booth in the corner. And I can see the plot point of like, oh, the teenage girls got distracted by the cute boys and they spent too long in the diner because one of them was chatting up a boy. You know, like that makes sense. But they played this super goofy, like TV kiddie comedy version of it where they don't even talk. They just go straight over there and jump up on the table, standing on the table. And like, what diner doesn't throw you out for fucking standing 3 abreast on their tables where they're trying to serve customers?
I don't know how to hear any more about tables. It felt like the movie was trying to come up with the scenario that would make us the most annoyed with the girls, which is a weird way to go because you just laid out a perfectly reasonable way for them to lose track of time in the diner without making me be like, I hope this guy shows up and just like kills them.
Which then they give you that fantasy of that because they show you a possible future flash forward where that happens. And maybe that's supposed to be satisfying.
And he doesn't just kill them. He kills the fuck out of them.
Yeah, it's gruesome.
He snaps Julia's neck. He slams it on a table and like it breaks. He stabs one of them in the stomach.
It's rough.
He's not messing around.
No, it's a scary part. And I think you're right. It's meant to aggravate you because the next scene is where Cassie has a full blow up and says, you guys suck. You should be sorry. That was the stupidest shit I ever saw, which is kind of fun.
It was a change of pace because the hero character would usually be like, I'm disappointed, but I understand. But she's just like, no, fuck you guys. Which I was like, yeah, I get it. But like, how is the news out that these girls are kidnapped in a newspaper?
Yeah, that was silly.
So the girls were boarding the train to Poughkeepsie, even if you're saying it's morning time, but I don't think it was. I thought it was like afternoon because it's dark by the time they're in the diner. So figure the train situation happened in the afternoon. It was like 4 hours ago. Who printed a newspaper with their photos on it and released it to the New Jersey suburbs in that 3-hour span?
Dropped it off to a roadside diner in the woods somewhere.
This is probably where they'll show up. So we should get the word out over here in Jersey. Just another thing where nobody gave a shit enough to come up with a realistic explanation for why that would happen.
I guess, like you said, because the movie actually started further back in time. Like today, you make that movie, it's just the guy sees it on his phone. But I mean, in the old days, you just put that thing on the TV screen at the diner, you know?
Which makes a lot more sense. And the girls are distracted because they're talking to the boys, so they don't hear that they're on the TV.
They don't see their faces on the screen or whatever.
Did we just fix Madam Web? Or at least one of the things.
One little thing. But you're right. Then that leads to another pretty brutal fight scene. Ezekiel keeps getting rammed into by cars the whole damn movie, but he's pretty tough.
Cars, my only weakness. Yeah, he gets hit by a taxi, an ambulance, cop car, fire truck. Like all the village people hit him with their car at some point. It's pretty great. Because like none of the characters can fight him. He's the only one with powers.
Right.
So they're all just like throwing shit at him. And it's not going great. So like, you know what? We can level the playing field with vehicles.
Yeah, they got one device. It's like, this guy's a superhero. How do we knock him out long enough to get away? And kind of the same thing keeps happening several times in the movie is like Cassie rams him with a car and then drives the girls away to yet another safe place.
I did like her, I think it was in the third act, but her trick with the AED paddles.
Yes.
Where they put him on the roof right when he lands. Like that was a clever little sequence.
Yeah. There's some good action. Even her driving that ambulance out of a parking structure through a billboard and into the path of where he was jumping was like a pretty good example of like how someone would use prescient powers to do something crazy that gave her the ability to defeat this superpowered villain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not everything's bad in this. There's some good stuff.
No, but that just makes the bad stuff hurt so much worse. But not in a way like, you know, I was mad mad at Argyle and I was mad at Matthew Vaughn for making it. But I'm not mad at any of the cast or crew of Madam Web. I feel bad for them because I really want to know how this happened.
It's a tough one, but then, I don't know, you just look at the name of the movie. Like, was it ever going to be more serious than this?
It was never going to be good. Yeah, no, but like this movie's worse than Morbius. It's worse than Craven.
I liked some things about Morbius. I didn't get past the opening scene of Craven yet, so I'm going to withhold judgment.
It's worse than any of the Venom movies for sure. I don't understand how it happened. But now we got to go to Peru.
Yeah, let's get back to some of those bad scenes and bad ideas we were talking about.
We're going to Peru. So Cassie, a fugitive from the law, just drives her broken ass cab to the airport.
Yeah.
I guess she just goes to LaGuardia and flies out while she's wanted by the law.
I guess so. There's kind of mixed messages on whether anybody actually identified her, because earlier she has to sneak into her own apartment. She goes through the back and climbs up the fire escape so that no one can see her because ostensibly she's on the lam from the law. But I watched with a closer eye on the second viewing. No one knows the names of the girls or the names of Cassie, who they suspect of abducting the girls, right? Like it's all just, they kind of know the descriptions.
Yeah, they describe her as like brunette woman in her early 30s or whatever, but no one says Cassandra Webb as far as I can remember.
So I didn't have a real problem with her being able to leave the country, just with how easy it was to retrace her mother's steps was pretty ridiculous.
Peru it's like a couple blocks long. Like how big is it? It's like a square mile.
Yeah.
It's got one little forest, one little cave. No, Peru's obviously a massive country. And the fact that she just finds the same clearing in the woods that her mom was is just
the exact same thing. She's got a little map. She's got a one-page hand-drawn map that her mom left in a trunk full of stuff.
It's just a drawing of Peru. It doesn't
it's just a drawing. It's got like a river and like an outline of a mountain on it. And she's studying it. And she's just like, oh, the directions said, take a plane, take the number 6 bus, walk into a clearing, turn right at the big tree. And then she looks up and she's like, hey, that branch looks familiar. That's a branch my mom took a photo of 30 years ago. And it's the exact same way it was then, because nothing in the rainforest grows or changes very quickly.
We also have no indication that she speaks even a word of Spanish. She's just navigating the Peru bus station flawlessly. It'd be funnier, but probably a waste of screen time if like they had her get on the wrong bus a bunch of times. And then finally she was like, all right, I found the one. I found the right bus.
And like they go to some lengths. And when I say lengths, I mean like they show 3 or 4 shots of her walking through the forest. So it wasn't like she just left the road and went straight to the mystical Las Arañas, which are hidden deep in the jungle that no one can find. She had to do several screens worth of traveling, but she's not sweaty. Yeah. She's still wearing her backpack on one shoulder like she just got off the bus and she's not expecting to walk a long way. And she's in the middle of the rainforest, which I looked up is approximately 193 million acres is the Peruvian Amazon. So it's pretty good luck that she didn't have to break a sweat to find the exact spot.
I thought it was weird how when she was right before she finds Las Arañas, there's just that diner right there. And she's like, oh, maybe I'll go get something to eat first.
Dances on the table.
Also, I'd be remiss if I did not mention her bitchin' red leather jacket that she does not wear to Peru. That's a sweet jacket.
It's a sweet jacket.
But in these scenes, she is wearing a flannel tied around her waist. And I was like, this feels like you guys meant for this to be in the 90s. And also like the Cranberries play as the end credits. I was like, what are you guys doing? Where does this movie supposed to take place?
I see what you mean. The flannels feel a little bit timeless now, but I can see if it was a 90s movie, that would have fit right in.
She seems like a grungy type. She would have liked.
She could be.
You know, like Mudhoney. And then she meets the leader of Las Arañas, Chief Santiago.
And he still loves his ADR. 30 years later, he can hardly say 2 lines in real life without re-recording them later.
When they're in the cave, I think all his lines are ADR. When they meet in the woods, he's actually like saying things. So I was like, huh.
Yeah.
Make it make sense. Were these like reshoots maybe? I don't know.
I guess that does seem like an easy reshoot. You get the actor just sit and face the camera and say about like 3 lines in a row to update everybody on the revised exposition that's needed to bring this home. Now, like you said, I'm willing to go with you that even the whole Peru trip might have been a reshoot, might have been an addition to the script, except that they bring home her character arc in this whole sequence.
She makes peace with her mom's memory. Yeah.
It's a pretty useful addition in terms of having the character go through an arc. Although I had to admit, I didn't realize that her primary character wound is that she thinks her mom sucked ass. She's like, my mom hated me. She did the stupidest thing in the world by risking me by going to the Amazon while she was pregnant. And then she has this vision quest, thanks to Chief Santiago, and talks to her mom in the vision. Like these visions, there's no limit to what you can do in them.
No, she hugs her mom. She hugs her mom who's been dead for 30 years. And her mom seems to like react to it.
And she not only communicates with her mom in the timeline that occurred in the place she's at now, in the Peruvian Amazon, but she jumps to a different time and place where her mom's in a doctor's office, learning that her baby has a genetic condition and that that's the reason why her mom went to search for the spider cure to save her baby's life. So she comes to peace and believes that her mom is not a piece of shit. She used to be, but she's not anymore. And now she loves her mom, and that unlocks her superpowers.
You think Carrie Bechet's hair is slicked back? That's pushed back. This is going to be our episode with the most I think you should leave references.
We're trying. We're dropping as many as we can.
We're going for it. Yeah, I hear everything you're saying, and I agree that it is a useful scene. It does a pretty decent job of kind of wrapping up this conflict that's hit or miss, whether you realize what's going on. But also, like, I just have no faith in the filmmakers here to be like, we need to include this in the first pass. Like, they could have just been like, oh, this gives us a chance to fix some shit that we forgot to address in the first time around.
It's kind of a deluxe fix script-wise, and it's kind of a cheap-looking fix movie-wise. It feels like a cheap device. Like you said, when Anya goes, I guess it's time for you to go to Peru. And then it's like, whoosh, and she's there. And
but she doesn't say it, though. She doesn't.
It'd be funny if they actually didn't allow these same actors to do the ADR and they had cheap sound-alikes.
They had me. You got to go to Peru. It doesn't sound like Anya at all. My spider. They took my spider.
You could have done the Ezekiel.
I could have done that.
Overdubs. Yeah. Nobody would have known.
Nobody would have been the wiser. All right. Should we take it home?
Yeah. I thought we were done, but no, there's a whole third act. So let's hear what
There's
happens.
a whole third act. We got one more.
Returning to New York, Cassie finds Ben and the girls gone. Turns out they're on their way to take Ben's pregnant sister-in-law to the hospital for an emergency delivery. But unfortunately, Ezekiel tracks them down and he attacks. Thankfully, Cassie once again arrives just in time to thwart him. She and the girls then flee to an abandoned fireworks factory where Cassie plans a few traps to slow Ezekiel down while they wait for a fire helicopter to arrive and rescue them. But as they do battle, Ezekiel destroys the rescue chopper, and then he puts each of the three girls into deadly jeopardy. Cassie must invoke her new powers to rescue each of the girls and then to spring her final trap on Ezekiel. He's crushed by falling debris and killed. Unfortunately, in the explosions, Cassie is also severely wounded, but the girls use the CPR skills that Cassie taught them to save her life. And when Cassie recovers, she has lost her eyesight and the use of her legs, but her clairvoyant spider powers have fully flourished. Cassie has now embraced the idea of taking the three teenagers under her wing, and she promises to support them in the future that she envisions for them, in which they all become costume superheroes.
The movie also never addresses how the girls get their powers, right?
No, that's a frustrating thing. To me, it's like the superhero tease of the three girls in this movie is worse than Surf Dracula, because at least Dracula surfs at the end of the pilot. Does he surf at the end? Or he's
at the end of the first season. Come on. You can't give that away in the pilot.
No, you're right. So this is the pilot to the season of Spider Dracula. Like,
if somebody's not super online, they have no idea what the fuck we're talking about.
We're speaking entirely in metaphor here. They tease these girls becoming superheroes and you don't even get close. And then it's like the end of the movie. It's like the big payoff is we're teasing them again.
I just want to, if you don't mind, read the Surf Dracula tweet for people to have some context.
Okay, yes, thank you. That would be helpful.
Back in the day, if you did a TV show called Surf Dracula, you'd see that fool surfing every week in new adventures. But in the streaming era, the entire first season's got to be a long-ass flashback to how he got the surfboard until you finally get to see him surf for 5 minutes in the finale. And that was by Topher Florence.
Thank you, Topher.
Timeless tweet.
That's a classic. It's incredibly helpful to shorthand this kind of thing. And yeah, these girls don't surf, man.
I don't have as big a, like in the first scene where we see them with their powers when they kill Ezekiel, they're mostly just like karate powers. Even Maddie's power is she has this spider exoskeleton suit that seems to be like doing most of the work for her.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, they don't necessarily have powers, but they have access to weapons technology that could be seen as powers by an untrained eye or something. But then no, at the end scene, when they flash forward to them, like Julia's literally shooting out like a glowing web at people and ensnaring them. And it's like, oh, so like we were doing full superpowers.
She's shooting something. But yeah, what's funny is like the girls don't know either. Cassie's adopted them. She's the den mother now. And they're hanging around together and they're like, do you see a good future for us? And she's like smiling like, yeah, I do. But they don't know that she sees them wearing these ridiculous costumes, blasting burglars in the middle of the night with spider powers.
I just want to point, none of these girls are orphans. All three of them have parents, two of which live in America. I don't think you can just adopt somebody who already has a family.
Well, actually, I think you can. What you do is when the nurse comes into your hospital room, you go, yeah, they're mine. And then after that, they're yours.
Oh, like legally. Yeah. It's like a finder's keeper situation.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The nurse, she's leaving the room. She notes down on the chart, the kids are hers. And then that goes
to the courts. Yeah.
It's kind of a done deal at that point.
All right. This section starts off with the whole fam going to the hospital for the birth of Spider Baby, but we still can't call him Peter.
No.
I'm really shocked and a little grateful that there wasn't a line, I don't know what we're going to call this baby, but whatever his name is, I bet he'll be amazing.
Yeah.
Actually, they should have put that line in there.
Mary, your child is spectacular. It's silly. And they even tease, they're like, Ben really likes being an uncle. Like they're trying to like cue you to put that together in your head too.
He may even be getting married soon. Shut the fuck up. But all these girls are going to be like 40 in the Tom Holland verse, right? So like, why don't we know about them in those movies?
I know.
They definitely have their powers by then.
But we already know there's so many Spider-Verses that you can explain away anything at this point.
Yeah, wasn't that the whole point of the third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie? Like maybe they just went to another dimension.
Yeah, just whatever. They're wherever.
And then, of course, we go to, like I mentioned, the famous Pepsi fireworks factory in Long Island City. And good for them for knowing New York geography like that and history, doing the research to find a local favorite landmark like that. I was shocked they didn't go to the Acme Mousetrap Factory. It's right in the same neighborhood. That would have been a cool place.
Okay. It's too bad they literally burned down the old Pepsi fireworks factory making this movie because I would have liked to visit Queens and get to check it out.
Pepsi firework factory burned down. Robert Vaughn is ass out. Works with his brother now.
He got another one in.
Got another one. This final fight is weird and bad. I don't like it at all. As much as we were praising the train scene and the diner scene for being like grounded, pretty good, pretty visceral action scenes.
Yeah.
This one just sucks shit.
It's very CGI. It's very fake. They're relying again on that trick where they like wiggle the camera a lot to distract you from the fact that not very realistic shit is going on.
And there's one scene where Ezekiel shoves Maddie, who's the skateboarder.
Okay.
And she grabs a metal support beam and does a whole acrobatic flip around it. And there's nothing we've seen in this movie to indicate that she should be able to do that at all. And the conspiracy theory going around was like, because she's fully CGI'd in that scene, it was supposed to be like somebody else, like another character that just didn't make it into the movie. But I don't know who it could have been. I'm not sure if I believe that, but it does stick out. I watched for it and I was like, yeah, that's a weird little sequence.
I mean, I'm not sure if I even noticed that exact thing, but I did take note that all three of those girls end up basically hanging from steel rails or beams. In that part, they're all in jeopardy, and Cassie has to split herself and astral project 3 ways to rescue them all. And none of their falls look survivable. Like they all fall onto a thing that any human person would hit that thing and bounce off and go tumbling down into the fire, but they all manage to cling to these impossible rails.
They learned from watching Alfie the cat fall off that rooftop in Argyle.
Yeah, they learned the lesson is be CGI and then you can do anything you want.
And they are in a lot of this sequence.
There's a lot of CGI. It gets very kiddie because like it's just about dodging. I guess because the premise is that they staged a big fight between 4 normal humans and a supervillain. And so they can't really fight him.
It's not a great recipe for like an exciting fight scene when one person can just beat the shit out of everyone else.
Yeah, so the fireworks and the random explosions have to do most of the fighting, which kind of works because that's Cassie's trick, is anticipating what's going to explode next and sidestepping it. But it's not that fun. And it kind of goes on for a while.
This movie? This episode?
Yeah, all of the above. There's some random shit in that fight. At one point, I don't know who it was, but Cassie hears someone's voice, might have been Obi-Wan or Old Ben, as they called him. Someone's voice says, use the web, while she's like running across the rooftop. And I don't even know what that came from. Was that the Arañas chief?
I assumed it was, Chief Santiago from Las Arañas, but there's no way to know for sure.
It was just one of those random things set off screen that this movie is famous for.
It was Shoshana from Girls. She was the one who said it.
Use the web.
What's her? Zosia or Zosha?
Yeah, I don't know how you say her name. Should we look it up real quick?
She looked like she was being held hostage for most of her scene. She kind of was, but like her character was, but find them. I pay you a fortune. I love all his off-screen lines to her. I got you this technology so you could find the girls. Use it better.
Okay, I looked it up. Google says it's Zosha Mamet. Is she
a Nepo baby? I was going to say, yeah.
Hold on, I got to look that up too.
Yeah, parents, David Mamet, Lindsay Krause.
Okay, so Shaw, I don't think I ever heard people say her name.
Yeah. People just call her Shoshana from Girls.
I know.
Which I'm guilty of as well.
Unfortunately for her, she got typecast in that. And yeah, her character is sort of trapped by the evil Ezekiel. And I guess she plays it really well because I felt bad for both the character and the actor.
Do you know Dakota Johnson's married to Chris Martin from Coldplay? I didn't know that.
I think I heard that. I wouldn't have necessarily offered that up to you, but it does sound familiar.
They've been married for almost a decade. That's pretty cool.
Oh, that's nice.
After I just talked shit about Coldplay on last week's episode.
I know.
Or did I talk shit about Snow Patrol? It's hard to say.
Oh, yeah.
Who was I meaner to by comparing one to the other?
You were mean to both in a combined insult.
While simultaneously praising Snow Patrol.
Yes. No, you admitted that you enjoy their work. But now it's time to be mean to Dakota.
Yeah, she sucks shit. She's so bad in this last scene. These last scenes, when she's in the hospital, when she's in the weird clock tower loft that they all live in.
All that is so weird. She's trying to be the spooky grandma all of a sudden, but it's not working. And the glasses make it worse. First, she's got like a weird bandage thing over her eyes.
Better look to just keep the bandages.
It was kind of a high-tech bandage, and then it's recreated in her vision of herself as a superhero in the future. She has some gnarly,
Call them what they are. They're the Bret Hitman Hart glasses.
Oh, yeah.
That he used to give out to little kids in the front row of wrestling shows.
Oh, he did that? You didn't get a pair?
I never sat front row at a wrestling show,
okay.
so my odds were severely limited.
Yeah, for people who don't follow wrestling, I would call them like iridescent Oakley blades, but like super oversized blade style glasses.
For those of you that do follow wrestling, they're the Bret Hart sunglasses.
Thank you. So. But then when she's not a superhero in a vision, when she's in the current world, she wears these dark red sunglasses, but the frames look equally bad. That was some bad design. I'm sorry.
Those are Chanel.
Are they?
No, I'm kidding. I have no idea.
They could be.
This scene sucks. No, it's a bad scene. The girls come in with Chinese food and they go, we got takeout, but we didn't know. And she goes, Kung Pao chicken sounds perfect. And they go, how did you know? It's like, bitch, you've been living with her for 6 months. She's psychic.
She does this every time you walk in the room. And yet they're all like freaking out.
She's blessing you before you even sneeze. And you're like, how did you know what we got? Also, like, white people only eat like 4 things from Chinese restaurants. It's just a good guess.
It's true.
I got nothing else, man. This movie's exhausting.
Yeah.
I watched this movie like 3.5 times this week
because
I just had to be like, it's like, did I miss something? Because first you were like, I think the version of the movie on the Plex is different than the one on Netflix. And then you were like, wait, no, I don't think that's true anymore. But I was like, no, I got to check. So I went back and
you
said,
did a full detective check. Oh, God bless you. And thank you for being such a dedicated podcaster.
But it's one of those movies though that it's just so hard to watch in like large chunks. You gotta take it in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
But it's just like every time I had a minute, I was like, all right, I guess I'll watch like 20 minutes of Madam Web right now.
And like we said, like it almost makes sense from a macro view. If you put it on and you're not paying attention, it seems like a regular movie. And then you'd like watch it and you're like, what's going on back there? Why is that guy saying what it looks like he's not saying? And so you do have to give it some attention to really just see how nutty it all is.
You know the best thing about the future, Ian?
What is the best thing about the future?
It hasn't happened yet.
Is that right?
It's the final line of the movie, meant to be meaningful, I suppose.
I really worked to try to figure out what meaning they meant us to take. It hasn't happened yet. I guess it means like
the best is yet to come.
Maybe. Or like if you're worried about a lot of bad things, you can still change them. That's kind of one of the messages of the movie. But by itself, that does not sound like any wisdom that I can use.
And also the Los Arañas guy said that only Cassie can change the future. So like the girls are asked out.
Oh.
You know, didn't he say that?
Well, that's why she has to hover over them.
Bit of a helicopter parent.
She doesn't have good luck with helicopters, though. When she calls them in to rescue, the fucking chopper pilots get torched. She fucking set those poor fire department pilots up for disaster.
Yeah, she didn't see that?
No, she's like, I got a perfect plan to rescue us. I'm using my skills to call the fire department chopper. And then 2 minutes later, Ezekiel's sending them to the ground in a fireball of death.
You knew exactly when you had to duck so the firework could blow a hole in a wall that you could run through like a fucking Looney Tunes character. But you didn't see the helicopter exploding in midair that you caused.
She's like, oh no, my friends.
Yeah, those could have been her coworkers for all we know.
Those are her buds. That's the whole thing. She's part of the fire department. And no one remarks on the fact that she just sent them to their death.
It's not even an issue. No one noticed. That's Madam Web.
Speaking of going down in flames, what happened to the careers of the people in this movie?
It's so weird doing that whole kind of, let's find out what happened to everyone. It's like, this movie came out like a month ago, but
yeah.
I will give you the information that I have.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit too about not just where they're going, but where they've been. So S.J. Clarkson, as I mentioned, nothing on the horizon yet, unfortunately, but veteran TV director. She's directed on such titles as Heroes, Dexter, Banshee, Jessica Jones, Succession.
That's a good list, man.
Yeah, those are all, and there's less prestigious stuff on her resume. Being a TV director, it feels more like a work-a-day gig. Like you get hired, you do an episode, you move on to the next one. You always want to be working. And it seems like she's got that down. She was originally tapped to direct the next Star Trek movie in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek first, the Chris Pine one. That whole series, I guess, just fell apart and nothing ever came of it.
Okay.
And then she was also attached as creator and director of Blood Moon, which was a Game of Thrones spinoff that was going to star Naomi Watts. They filmed a pilot for it and wasn't well received by HBO and wasn't ordered to series. And then they went with House of the Dragon instead. But it was like back in those days when they were still like they filmed pilots for 5 different prequel shows or spinoffs, whatever they might be. And then we're like, we'll just pick the best one. So it wasn't that one. It didn't get picked, but no idea what she's up to, which you could say the same things for the writers of this movie. And as much as I was like, I feel bad for Clarkson, it feels like the movie got taken away from her at some point. I don't care about these dudes.
Okay.
They fucking suck. I don't know about them as people. They might be lovely.
Might be awesome dudes.
Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, which great name, Burke Sharpless. They are a writing team, and wouldn't you know it, never written a good movie. Let me go through some of their credits. Dracula Untold, one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Really?
Unfortunately, made just a little too much money to qualify for the pod.
Okay. Or fortunately.
The last Witch Hunter, which I think that was the Vin Diesel fantasy thing.
Goodness.
But he's still just wearing like a black tank top in it because, it's Vin Diesel. Gods of Egypt, which, unfortunately, stay tuned for that one. We're going to have to talk about that someday.
Okay.
The Power Rangers reboot from 2017.
Interesting.
Stay tuned for that one as well. Morbius,
sure.
Which hilarious that they were like, let's give him another shot, man. They really knocked it out of the park with fucking Morbius. Let's throw another property at him.
Yeah.
And then I guess they were also the showrunners and creators of the Lost in Space reboot TV show.
I forgot that happened.
Yeah, that was like 2018 maybe. It ran for a couple seasons. I didn't watch it. I assume it sucks because these guys were involved.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that Clarkson gets another chance because it seems like she was the victim of basically a poorly run cinematic universe. And we've seen better directors, or not necessarily better, but good directors get chewed up in the Marvel universe, which was, managed much better.
Chloe Zhao got chewed up by them, and she's a fantastic director.
Yeah, so let's hope Clarkson gets to bounce back from this and it doesn't get pinned on her. But I think you're right. A lot of the blame for that universe might fall on Suzume and Sharpless.
Not for nothing, but like just along those same lines, we've seen good directors get chewed up by the Spider-Man universe because fucking J.C. Shandor directed Kraven.
Oh, yeah. That's a current chewing. He's being chewed up right now.
Margin Call, A Most Violent Year, Triple Frontier. Like, he's a good director.
He's really good. I like his work.
Feel bad for these people. I think you just gotta take these gigs. They're probably the best paying gigs in the biz right now. Like, you gotta do it. But it just seems, especially with Sony, where they don't have that kind of steady hand of a Feige to guide them. It just ends up being very like slapdash.
Yeah, it's a really weird arrangement. I mean, there was no recipe for it. The recipe got made up as they went along by the Marvel folks, and they had something that worked for a while, and then that stopped working, and then it's all hit or miss. But it's very difficult, as this movie is just one of the movies that prove how hard it is.
To be fair, the Spider-Man universe has been mostly misses. Even like the Venom movies make money, but no one's under the impression that they're good.
Yeah.
They're entertaining because Tom Hardy's a maniac, but that's about all they got going for him.
I think you're right.
So Johnson, is this Dakota Johnson's first time on the pod? I think it might be. Can't think of another movie she's been in that we covered.
Oh, yeah.
So Dakota, she's been pretty prolific. In 2022, she did Cha Cha Real Smooth, Am I Okay, and Persuasion. And then in 2023, she did Daddy-O. Then Madam Web was her only movie in 2024, but she's got 3 in various stages of production. So she's got Verity in pre-production, which is a Michael Showalter directed romantic thriller, which sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
And then she's got The Materialists in post-production, directed by Celine Song, which is another romantic comedy with Chris Evans. Actually, that'll be interesting. A couple of Marvel refugees, although Evans is going back to it now. And then Splitsville is in post-production as well, which is a comedy directed by Michael Angelo Covino, starring Adria Arjona, who we've talked about on the pod before. That's coming this year. And then the only other person I wanted to check in on was Sydney Sweeney, because she's kind of like the second lead of the movie, I would say.
She kind of is. You kind of expect her to be. So maybe we give her...
There's some bias.
Because she's such an it girl in Hollywood in the last 18 months. It feels like they knew that she was the co-star, even though she's got a fairly small role.
Yeah, it is like weird to see her being in this small role in this bad movie, but she's in it.
It's clearly a setup so that they can use her and put her in a movie where she's got a big role and she wears a costume and kicks ass and everything, which she doesn't get to do in this movie.
Right, but then that movie's just never going to happen.
No, that's not going to happen.
She's been super busy, though. She was in the surprise hit Anyone But You in 2023, a movie that she said she was only able to get made because she did this. So that was kind of her. She talked about this movie, and I wanted to touch on the stars of this movie and how they handled its reception, because it felt like they all took shots at this movie almost immediately upon its release.
I see.
Sydney Sweeney on SNL was like, you've seen me in White Lotus and Euphoria, and you definitely didn't see me in Madam Web. And it's like, the movie's still in theater.
Yikes, yeah.
But yeah, so she did Immaculate in 2024, and she was a producer on both of those. So she's got her hands in the production side of the movie business as well now, which good for her.
Yeah, that's neat.
Seems like she's got a good head on her shoulders and is trying to set herself up for a nice long career.
For sure.
She's got The Housemaid and Echo Valley in production. Keep your eyes peeled for those.
Cool.
Now, Ian, we did it. We banged out 5 episodes in the month of January.
No one even knew there were 5 Wednesdays in January until we looked at the calendar. We're pioneers in that way.
That was late in the game. We were like, fuck, 5 Wednesdays. Are we going to do this? Are we really going to do it?
Yeah, we were already like, okay, can we do all 4 Wednesdays? And then we looked at the calendar like, oh, damn it, there's 5. The first one was New Year's Day, by the way, because that's the way calendars work.
Correct. What movie would you have dropped from the schedule if we had only 4?
Either Borderlands or Argyle. They're kind of the soft, squishy parts.
Yeah. Argyle was more interesting to talk. Borderlands is just a bad movie.
Yeah.
Argyle's bad in new and interesting ways.
That's true. Borderlands is a real throwaway movie, unfortunately.
So I probably would have dropped Borderlands. But I'm glad we got to do it. We got to do 5. And we're going to treat ourselves, probably take a week off, and then come back with a mailbag episode. So be sure if you have any questions, get them in soon because we've got enough to run with it. We're going to start thinking of our answers.
But if you can beat those questions, maybe you'll edge one out, or maybe we'll add more and just keep on talking.
Please don't talk to our listeners about edging. It's a family show. I'm such a stinker. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod if you can. We appreciate it.
We do.
Leave us a review. Helps new listeners find the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Follow us on Blue Sky, BlastZonePod.bluesky. Whatever that thing is.
Something.
You can email us, BlastZonePod@gmail.com with questions, feedback, movie suggestions. We're always happy to hear from you. And we'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.